Hi, everybody. Welcome to New Jersey Wedding Podcast, the podcast to listen to as you plan your wedding, especially in New Jersey. We are your hosts, Andrea Purtell and Celia Milton, and we are both professional wedding officiants here in the state of New Jersey. And thanks so much for joining us today. Celia, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. It's a gorgeous day in New Jersey. Sunny and pretty and nice. How are
Yeah,
you?
beautiful, beautiful. I just came in from a
Hmm.
dog walk finally without the ice and snow.
Oh, I know.
Very
It's so
nice.
much better.
It was
I know.
extra long, although my dog doesn't care because he's husky. He's part husky, so he's happy with
Stay
it.
out there. Mine is like, can I go back and lay in the warm bedroom? Just let me get out of here. I'm done. I'm finished. Well, we have a great set of guests today. We and Morgan and Sherry have been with us before. They are the co-owners of Bride Lawyers, and they also have Groom Lawyers, which I think is pretty brilliant on their part.
Yeah.
Um, Lovely to talk to. Really very interesting. Every time I have an interaction with them, whether it's, online, because they have a terrific website with lots of great articles and blogs and things like that. Um, I'm always struck with how positive and helpful and upbeat they are. And and I always learn something from them. And I think, for our people who are listening, just you will think about things you never thought about before, which is really kind of helpful, you know?
Right, right. From not only prenups, which have become more
Yeah.
commonplace,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
especially especially if you enter into the marriage and one or both of you already own property, or
Hmm.
maybe you have kids or something like that, but it's or own a company or something like that. Whatever, they've become more commonplace, but also wills. You should have a will drawn up after you're married. And your contracts with your vendors, that's so important to understand what the contract says.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they make it approachable. They're both brilliant attorneys. They make it all approachable, easy to talk about, and get information
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
So,
And, it feels more like, we said it's really another kind of commitment to your marriage that, you want all these details, all these things to be worked out. It's really a way of caring for the other person that's in your marriage with you. And
yes.
sometimes it seems, punitive and negative, but I don't really think of it that way at all. I think it's really, I care about you enough to make sure that everything is taken care of, that we're all under control, from the wedding ring insurance, which we talk about like all the time,
Yes, yeah.
to your contracts and everything should be in order. So you're not worried about those things.
Right. And we hit on something we hadn't talked about before, and that was making sure if you're having a destination wedding,
Mm-hmm.
ensuring that your marriage is legally recognized back
Yes.
home. And, they did, well, you'll hear it in the interview, folks, but they do recommend uh, getting legally married here first and
Yeah.
avoiding all that red tape and possibly it not being legal.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and more red tape in the future because if you have a license that's from somewhere else, you can't just like bring it to, your health insurance people if that's what you're trying to do with it. It's most of the time it needs to be translated and it can't just be translated by your cousin who also happens to speak Peruvian.
yeah.
It's a little bit more. I just think that that's one thing. If I was going to go and get married elsewhere, I just want to do it in an easy, clear, understandable way here that I knew we were actually married and not have to worry about, regulations in other places.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you're also spending so much money on your wedding. You want to make sure your contracts with this, especially your
Yes.
venue, um, are are what they should be, for
Yeah.
everyone. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really interesting,
Really informative.
important um, interview. And I think you guys will enjoy it. You guys will enjoy their websites too. They're very informative.
Mhm.
They have booklets, they have a great blog, and a lot of helpful information.
Yeah, they're very, very, and they're just really nice people.
Yeah.
They're really fun to deal with. So,
Yeah, it's
uh,
that's great for you when you're talking to them about things that can seem I don't know,
Scary. It's
scary
scary
like
stuff.
prenups and wills. Nobody wants to talk about that kind of stuff.
No.
And they're attorneys, but they are so open and easy to talk to and very intelligent. So,
Yeah,
um,
really nice women.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
great.
So anyhow, you guys will probably want to follow New Jersey Wedding Podcast so you don't miss an episode. We have some great venues and vendors coming up.
Yeah.
You know that tomorrow Crystal Point Yacht Club comes out.
Oh yeah.
We had a great interview with them. We have
Mhm.
Bear Brook Valley. Is that
Bearbrook Valley's coming up, and the Indian Trail Club is coming up too.
Indian Trail? Oh, we have so many great venues, great vendors, and also a lot of advice about your ceremony and other wedding related subjects. So follow, like, and if you have any questions, just hit us up. Dreaming of the perfect intimate wedding that's all about the two of you? Exchange vows with the sand between your toes on a beautiful beach, or say I do surrounded by nature in a scenic park, or under the romantic arch in my cozy office. New Jersey Elope makes your special day effortless and unforgettable. Say I do in a beautiful setting without the stress. We handle the details so you can focus on the love. Perfect for couples who want a simple, elegant, and meaningful ceremony. Contact New Jersey Elope today to plan your dream elopement. Quick, easy, and stress-free. New Jersey Elope.
Good morning, everybody. We are so excited to have the dynamic duo, I think, Morgan Weil and Shari Rivkind. And she says, we wanted to say kind because we are kind. And that's been my experience with getting to know you two. And they are the masterminds behind Bride Lawyer and Groom Lawyer, which doesn't sound as glamorous and helpful as it might be, but in getting to know them and talking to them, they should really be one of your first calls. We mentioned that on our pre-planning little
Right.
episode because there are so many things when you go to their they have a wonderful newsletter that you can sign up for on their website. You're going to learn about things that you never even know you needed to know about. So I'm going to stop talking and let them talk. It's nice to see you both. How are you?
We are fabulous. Thank you
Yeah,
for having us again.
yeah.
No, it's
Oh,
we know you're
always a
fabulous.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a pleasure.
Oh,
You guys are so informative. Your website is excellent. Every couple should go to it, you know, Bride Lawyer or Groom Lawyer. I think today we're focusing on groomlawyer.com.
Yes, it's all started because when Bride Lawyer was born, we started doing a lot of wedding shows and a lot of brides, and grooms were there. And, it's very pink, it's very female empowerment. But then
Uh-huh.
all the guys were kind of looking at us and they're like, what about us?
Yeah.
And,
mhm.
that's when another light bulb, went off. And, Shari and I, thought we need to start this. Groom Lawyer.
And it's funny because what happened is we had a lot of brides. Maybe they had family attorneys and they were doing their prenups, but they would send their grooms to us. And I think the grooms were sort of like, who's your lawyers? Bride lawyers, huh?
Yeah.
So
Ah.
we decided it's time for them. And I think that, grooms see weddings differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They really do. They're interested in different things. So it's good to focus on them. We also feel that as women ourselves,
Mm.
we get a little insight into how women think, and we
Yeah.
Mhm.
can help guide the guys. One of the recent blogs we did was called Groom, Groom, Groom. And it was all about the importance of a groom being put together for like engagement photos and the wedding
Mm.
itself. And the story, the truth behind it is that, and we're not going to say who, but one of us
Oh,
fell
well, let's
upon
see. Who could that be?
fell upon a long time ago friend's wedding pictures, and everything was exquisite. But his hair was a mess, his beard wasn't shaved.
Uh,
And we were like,
But the tux looked great. but yeah, the grooming of the groom
And
was
we,
lack thereof.
and we just, the first thing to both of us was like, what was he thinking?
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It was,
You
the
know, so-
focus needs to be on both. Not there's so much focus on the bride, and her getting ready and looking good. That you got to do that too.
Did you
But
ever see the movie Serendipity,
yes,
where she keeps on like pushing him to get a haircut and he's like, he just can't get the haircut. But that was, kind of there was other reasons for it. But yeah, like, it does seem like this is a phenomenon.
so we can fill those grooms in on a little
There you go.
insight to their women as well.
And
Right.
if you have two of them, then you have to get both of them on board. You know?
Exactly.
We were talking about that the other day, actually, because like, how many times have we gone to a wedding, Andrea, where they they don't really wear suits very often, and the vents are still with the X stitches,
you know
or they
what?
have the label on the sleeve because they think
Oh,
it's supposed to be there. It's like,
I know.
I
give me
was at
those
a
scissors.
high-end venue this weekend, and one of the groomsmen, and I wonder why they don't do it. It had the X's in the back, like somebody needs, and I'm looking and I'm going, do I go and say something? I don't want to offend anybody. That where's the wedding planner? We need somebody needs to go and tell him to cut that without hurting his feelings.
Give me
Yeah.
that cake knife.
And I always think that I think, oh, the photographer's going to say something, because those threads come out real quick, like just you don't need too much, just pull them. But yeah, you look for somebody to fill them in because in today's world, guys aren't always wearing suits depending
Yeah.
on the job. But when we spoke to you about bride lawyer, I think that bride lawyer not only just being women and a woman getting married, that of course you would think for brides kind of go there first, but a lot of couples are waiting until they're older to get married, like maybe
Yes.
their early 30s or something like that. And because of that, a lot of women might already own their own home. They might, it's not like when you get married in your 20s and neither one of you own anything yet. For instance, my daughter is 33. She's not married yet, and she just bought her first house. So if she were to get married, in the next couple of years, you might want to protect that investment or vice versa. Because when you wait longer to be older to get married, you own more already.
Exactly. And also congratulations to her. That is such a
Yeah, isn't
great
that exciting?
achievement.
Yeah, she put it all on her own. Good job.
But yes, we do find in a lot of cases that we're involved with, houses. A lot of people do have property that they want to protect in a prenup.
Yeah, yeah.
And it gets even more complicated. Sometimes they own it maybe with a parent.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true.
It's double the need to protect it.
Yeah.
They own businesses or they have children. Or I don't know. And I'm sure you do. People who come to a marriage with a significant amount of debt, whether it's student debt
Yeah.
or, consumer debt. Like, well, how do you handle that? How does that get dealt with, And
It's true. I'll tell you, I think a lot of people, they think of it as protecting assets. They don't necessarily consider the importance of dealing with people's debts.
Yeah.
And liabilities. Yes.
Oh, that's true.
So a prenup is very important, and a prenup is really for everyone nowadays. Although sometimes prenups are seen as maybe still even seen as taboo. How do you speak to a couple um, about a prenup and explaining why it's so important?
Well, actually, oddly enough, we found a percentage. What was the percentage, Shari?
40%.
Of young couples, millennials, and even Gen Zers are getting prenups.
That's
And
great.
Good.
it's fabulous. It really
Yeah.
is. Because not only does it, cover and protect assets and, cover liabilities, depending on the prenup, but it also really does kind of get into that financial disclosure, that financial talk that every couple should have before they tie the knot.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
I think the young couples, it's a different world they've grown up in.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the big things has to do with a lot of them are the product of divorced parents.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah,
may be
it's
more
true.
in tune with the effects of divorce.
Well,
A lot of them have gig jobs, right? And,
Mhm.
you know, it's a lot more people creating their own businesses years ago. So they have the ability to have more to protect. And it's just a totally different mindset they have from
it is.
people my generation.
And I do find that they are more eager to learn more and become more financially literate, as well as, knowing the law and knowing their rights.
Yeah.
I think that that's great. And I especially love the contract part. I think again, the occurrence of COVID made everybody a little bit differently aware about those kinds of things. It's like, well, and I don't necessarily think whether it's a prenup or whether it's a contractor, it's not a sign of mistrust. It's a sign of like everybody just feeling better about it because everything is
Empowering
covered.
yourself. Yeah.
Everybody's calmer about it.
I have to tell you, I think one of the tough things for a lot of people when planning their wedding is falling in love with either a venue or a specific vendor, and then they get the contract, right? And the contract may have bad terms.
Yeah.
And then what do? They have found the venue of their dreams, but they can have an unreasonable contract.
Yeah.
We recently fell into one
Mm-hmm.
with a client, and it was a very large, popular venue. And we were shocked to see how bad the terms were. And it was an unfortunate circumstance where they needed to cancel the wedding. And
Wow.
again, they didn't really look at it when they signed it. And lo and behold, the terms were terrible. You know,
Yeah.
Morgan and I were both saying we would never have signed to this
Absolutely
contract.
What's
not.
the biggest red flag you see in vendor contracts?
The
If you,
cancellation terms.
what's
Yes,
that?
I think, in other words, there's, cancellation terms. I think people get confused. You have a payment schedule,
Mhm.
and then often there's a separate cancellation policy. If it's so many days before the wedding,
Right.
you get back this, you get back that. And not necessarily do the payments and what you owe match up.
Ah,
Yeah.
Sometimes you may have paid in more than the clause says, and then you're trying to get money back. And then I think there's a weird area of law that a lot of people don't understand. A lot of contracts say we get to keep this or you'll pay this if you cancel the wedding. And it's because it's very difficult to determine what our damages will be. And you can understand that, like with the
Yeah.
venue. You cancel it 2 months before,
Right.
how are they going to get a replacement?
right.
However, what the law says is that clause has to be reasonable and not a penalty.
Interesting.
More and more, you see this clause and most people think, oh my God, I have to pay that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Ah,
And if it does not properly estimate what the real damages will be, it is not enforceable. So
You know, I,
gotta
I have,
wait,
cannot be punitive. I like that. Yeah.
and that's the word, punitive. And I think that a lot of people, they just sort of just assume I'm left
Mhm.
with this. And they're really not, because, there's another little concept that if a contract is broken, such as you cancel your wedding, they have a duty to, the legal term is mitigate. And that means reduce or, you know, get rid of their damages. So that same venue if they have a cancellation policy, has a duty to try to find another wedding party.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Also, we do
And
recommend.
if I can just finish, if they and that, for all you know, that new wedding party may spend even more money with them than you would have.
Right.
So
Right.
they have no damages. Why should they keep anything?
Exactly. But we do recommend, like, when brides and grooms go through this experience, to definitely consult with an attorney before they agree to anything. Because as you just said, Sherry, you won't necessarily have to pay anything. And, you could actually end up walking away and maybe even getting money back.
Right, right. It's such an investment. I know that the low end here in Jersey, 25,000 to 65,000 for your wedding, for your venue. And it's such an investment that it's worth it to have the contract to consult groomlawyer.com or bridelawyer.com
Mm.
and have you guys look over the contract for them or advise them. I think it's just so important. It's such an investment.
And also, your contract should be personalized to you.
Okay.
Should specify exactly your wants and desires. Like a lot of contracts we see, they have that unfortunate clause, if there's like a death to your future spouse, that they will, honor the
Yeah.
terms, and the cancellation regarding that and give you a full refund. But sometimes it just goes with that specified spouse. There is other people to consider, like your parents, and life happens. Just because you're getting married doesn't mean things stop for your wedding day. So you kind of want to cover all those bases before signing.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just you don't just have a venue. I mean, I think we sat down with a colleague and we counted up all the possible vendors that somebody could have for a wedding. It was like in the 40s. When you can and you look at some of the Instagram posts with like credit for everything from, the venue to the cufflinks, it's like there's a lot of people involved in this,
Yeah.
And I feel like, again, having gone through COVID and what a mess. I mean, hopefully we never have anything like that again, but I mean, nobody really knew what to do. But,
Right.
I have some venues that were very accommodating to people and others that weren't. And that is word of mouth that can follow you for years.
Right.
And can I tell you, I think that's what, I always tell everyone, if you run into a problem, try to talk to them first.
Yeah.
And my other big rule is never put anything in writing you wouldn't want a judge to see. And I learned that
I
from
like
my own
that.
experience when I was a young attorney. I wrote something really silly I never should have, and it came back to haunt me.
Uh-oh.
Just
Um,
experience helps, right?
Well, my contract does have a clause for if you get kidnapped by aliens. So we tried to make our contract a little bit funny, but it also has been gone over by a number of lawyers that I married, so I feel a little safe about it.
Do you
no,
guys help at all with couples planning destination
Oh,
weddings? Any
very good
advice on
question.
that? What to make sure it's legal or?
We certainly do recommend our brides and grooms to get married in the States first before
Yes.
they, go abroad, because of, specifics such as, Sherry.
well, no, again, it's not uncommon that you can have this foreign wedding, and it's actually just a service. And it's not something that even that country or, principality considers a valid marriage. So the easiest way, and can I tell you, we find most couples do it. They get
Yeah.
married, maybe at City Hall.
Yeah. Or with Celia and I,
Yes,
because we
yes, that's
both
right.
do. Look at,
Exactly.
come to my little wedding arch. We got you.
Right.
And you can have I mean, listen, that's even better because they can have a personalized, nice experience here because not everybody is going to go over.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, honestly, it's not that we discourage destination weddings, but, I think a lot of people think they're cheaper and they do not necessarily end up.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've heard of things like crazy fees regarding baggage and things to get things over to the,
Well, and
foreign.
you never, when you need that wedding license, you need to have a wedding license that is in English. If it was done someplace else, you can't just get your cousin to translate it. It's got to be it's got to be a legal thing that's translated. I've had a number of people that have had, issues with this kind of thing. We got married in some teeny tiny dot of an island, and we don't even know if was it a waiter, was it an officiant? We don't have no
Yeah.
idea.
I like that. It
And
could just be a service, not a legal
yeah.
ceremony, not illegal. So just make sure that's good advice. Just make sure it's more than just a service or play it safe, have a little intimate what we call elopement or
Do it
a
here.
civil ceremony here before you go. Nobody needs to know if you
And
don't want them
also,
to.
and also to consider, who's able to actually attend that destination wedding. Is,
Yeah.
your grandma Louise, able to go?
Yeah.
Or is she unfortunately too, like, up there in years in order to make it? And it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
That would seem like a whole other level of cancellation conversation, when you're talking about people flying around. And I don't know, I would not be flying around right now. Too many bolts are flying out of too many airplanes. It freaks me out. I'll just walk there, thanks. But I would highly recommend for, people who are whatever stage they are in their planning to visit Bride Lawyer or Groom Lawyer. The websites are very informative. They're much, I don't want to say friendlier is not exactly the word I was looking for, but it's not going to be like drastic and unfriendly and scary. It's going to be, you really come away from your websites thinking that, you have an advocate for you. And me too, as a vendor, it's like, this is the clearer everything is before you get into this, then you can taste the cakes and, figure out why the place cards are the wrong colors. But you need to have the big things covered. And that's,
Yeah.
I think that's something you do very gracefully.
And I
Yeah.
do find there's like two parts to wedding planning. There's the vendor contracts, and then there's the prenups and wills.
Mhm.
And these are the legal, aspects of your wedding that you should be really looking at with a close eye and not rushing the process. So many grooms and their brides like to just like check off,
Mm.
on their checklist. And, it's just so exciting and there's so many moving parts, but just slow down. We always recommend slow down and enjoy the process, but also if you ever have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to speak up,
Yeah.
with your vendors, talk to family and friends, talk to, your friendly lawyer,
Yeah.
groom lawyer.
Yeah, now you mentioned something because we talked about prenups and but wills as well. Now this is
Hmm.
something to do either, I don't know if they do it before the wedding or directly after. Wills can be so important, especially if you have children that you're bringing into the marriage, and you want to make sure that they're taken care of in a proper way. That type of thing. Is that the most common reason people will get a will?
Well, I think it's one of them. I think that a lot of people, they really don't understand what happens if they don't have a will.
Mhm.
Mm.
Each state, it's called intestate succession. And each state has their own policy. Every state is very different. It's New York and New Jersey, for example, are very different
Oh,
in who will get your stuff. So, for example, in New Jersey, let's say you're married and you just have children from that marriage, your spouse will get everything. Very simple and clear. However, not so if you have, if your spouse has stepchildren, I mean, has their children, um, your spouse will actually share with your children.
okay.
Another weird thing is that if you have stepchildren and you have not formally adopted them, and you could believe they're your own and been their parent for
Mm.
20, 30 years, they will not inherit under New Jersey's
Yeah.
intestate
Yeah.
law.
Oh,
Well, I've
very
had some
interesting.
horrifying stories of people who well, we're not going to really take care of that. We never did this. And it's like 20 years later, and now you have a problem.
Yeah.
Personally, I've gone through that. And, I would never choose for anybody to have to go through that kind of nightmare because it's completely avoidable. And, in a way, I really feel like this kind of, money discussions for many, many couples are, and many just human beings, never mind couples, are like not the most fun thing anybody wants to talk about. But I feel like it's a real sign of trust and commitment to be willing to enter into discussions that make all these here it is. Let's deal with it now, because dealing with it now is always better than having to deal with it later in any situation that involves property or kids or money or anything. You always deal with it now. Don't whine about it and wait until it's too late.
Yeah, and I tell
sorry.
you, I'm going to flip us back to prenups, because I recently wrote a blog, and it was just on this, that, basically, if you're, doing a prenup together, you're doing it when you're so in love, and you're just thinking about what's reasonable and
Yeah.
what's going to take care of both of you. Yet divorces are not that way. If you're divorcing, people are hurt, people might feel betrayed, they might feel angry, and people do crazy things. I've had people fight over, I give the example of phonograph records.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot tell you, this one
That too.
couple was out of their mind. And like, who cares? I mean, this is me. Some people collect them, but who
I know.
cares? I mean, but people will fight over. I knew I knew a man whose biggest problem in the divorce was that his ex-wife got their fancy, like $2,000 cappuccino maker.
God's sake.
They were fighting over this. So, here you start nitpicking about little things. The other thing people do, and this is the nastiest, and it's not just on TV. I have had many cases. One will use custody of the children as a fighting thing to get another asset. Maybe you have a vacation home. One of them really want the vacation home. They bring custody into dispute. Try to use that. And can I tell you, when you have a prenup, one thing you can't address is anything to do with custody or child support. So that's taking that off the table.
Yeah.
As far as your assets, and you don't have that chip to be used against you. So these are the kind of things that really make more sense to let's try to cut away at some things we can only agree with, because divorces are expensive. They get protracted, and a lot of it has to do with people hiding their assets. But when you do a prenup, you have to have full financial disclosure.
Yeah.
So at least from the onset what they started with, right? And it's just one of those things where it really alleviates so much of the cost. Because one of the biggest things that runs up costs in a divorce is finding out what the other one has. And that discovery and its motions, and every motion is going to cost you a couple $1,000s for the lawyer to do. If you have a really sneaky spouse that's trying to hide what a business is worth, you get into things like forensic accountants, private investigators.
And she handled the case not too long ago regarding that very entertaining case, but too long for this podcast.
But the bottom line is that, divorces are messy. I'll give an example of what everyone has to think about. I cannot tell you how many times couples have come to me and they're like, no, this is going to be a simple divorce. We have nothing.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be simple and quick. And I finally learned to say, you don't have simple, quick divorces. And the ones you do, like my own, the divorce itself was very quick. We actually opened and closed it in 3 weeks. We then fought for 10 years in the courts.
Oh my God.
So simple, fast divorce doesn't guarantee you happiness either.
And
No.
Going to flip it back to wills, one thing both of us have been noticing, and we've been noticing for a long time, but now it's more prevalent than ever. And I think it has a little bit to do with our changing society and people cohabitating and getting married later. But we found that so many couples who are married and have children do not have a will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't get over it. We ask all of them, do you have, and it's like, oh, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. Listen, The minute that baby's born, because I'll tell you simple things, guardian.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid you guys be in a joint accident or something.
Yeah.
Who is
Yeah.
going to be the guardian? And if you have assets, who's going to administer those assets? And I have to tell you that I sat through so many of these hearings in the court, and you have one judge. They're chancery judges, which mean they get to sort of, there's guidelines, but not as many guidelines as you would think. A lot of it is under the concept of what's fair.
Okay.
And you have that one judge listening to witnesses and family members. Sometimes they fight over these things out of duty or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily who you would want.
Mm.
It may, your trustee may be a family member you don't think is so financially savvy.
Yeah.
It's really, and people also, that's another thing. A lot of people think that if you appoint godparents, that
Yeah.
they're assumed to have
Uh-huh.
any rights.
All right.
Godparents have no rights.
Right. No, they're
and
this. Yeah, that's not a thing. Yeah.
And I have to tell you, there is no preference in the law for a court to appoint a godparent. They actually tend to go to family first. And if you choose your best friend who you really would want, they may get passed over for your sister who drives
It's just, yeah. I mean, it just makes sense to be dealing with all of these kind of things when clearer heads prevail.
Right.
It's a part of when, we both of us do memorial services too. And in so many cases, people have never occurred to them that they were going to have to deal with this. And now we have 3 days, 4 days, 6 days, everybody's bereft and crazy, and to wait until you're in a situation where you have things to be settled it's not the best time to figure out what should have been done months and months and months ago.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to mention that my son, as I said before, my son got engaged a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, and I think this is, grooms when they go and get the ring, because I know you guys, and I remember asking, what's the biggest piece of advice? What do people forget? And you're like, insure the ring. So he carried this ring around with him for a couple of weeks too, because he wasn't sure when he was going to pop the question, But one of the first things I said to him was, is it insured? And it wasn't. It was something which I was surprised that the jewelry he bought it from didn't have that, but they don't all offer that or advise that. And I was like, you need to check. You need to check with your, they currently rent with your renter's insurance, or make sure it's insured. He got back to me and said, I've got it insured now. But you never know what's going to happen. And I think grooms, when you go out there and buy the ring, right?
Absolutely. And I do find with grooms, and why we started, one of the other reasons we started with Groom Lawyer is to sympathize with their experience during wedding planning. A lot of brides, they're going crazy with all the details, like the, very, specific details, which a lot of grooms we have found don't really love, details regarding the cake tasting and the flowers, but they certainly do care about, those contracts and the cancellation policies.
We also, what we find? We find the grooms, they care maybe about the venue. They
and the band or DJ.
The band. They may get into the food. These are the kind of things, and it's one of those things. What we tell the grooms, listen, the biggest thing we hear from brides is that the guys don't do anything, right?
Yeah.
And the grooms are just not getting involved and don't want to, address envelopes or look at flowers. As grooms, what they should do is try to be active in the areas that they care about.
Right.
It'll reduce a lot of stress on your bride, and will lead to a happier journey.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. Good advice. Good advice there. Yeah. Do you have other than that, before we wrap it up, do you have any other advice specifically for grooms other than getting involved there? Or you have a lot of helpful guides on your website too. I want to tell our listeners that the helpful full guides and your blog are fantastic, full of
Yeah,
great
we call it the
information.
grog.
Oh yeah, the grog, the groom blog. Yeah, I love it.
I-
No, I think again, listen, we know perfect partnership. It's sort of well known that often opposites attract,
Yeah,
right? And when planning a wedding and getting married, it's really good to go with the party's strengths. And if
yeah,
you have a spouse and that bride, she wants to just pick colors and do cake tastings and pick her gown and do that, well, then the groom should step up and handle the other things, reading the contracts, knowing exactly what those terms are, negotiating them if necessary, taking care of the finances. There's bank accounts you're going to have to set up and things like that.
yeah.
And just in general, go on each other's strengths.
Right. A great way to split the tasks up. So not, take away the stress, go with the strengths. Great advice. I want to tell our listeners that we will put a link to your website as well as your Instagram so they can go directly to your website. I love all your helpful tips, your newsletter. You can get the books on Amazon. It's a great website, very informative, and couples can contact you with their questions and figure out how to set up a prenup and the will and their vendor contracts and everything.
yeah,
So thank you so much for
great
joining
stuff.
us again. We always love speaking with you guys.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today.
And we absolutely love talking to you guys. We really
Yeah.
Thank you
do.
so much. Thank you. It's been fun. Have a great, nice, warm. We're having a heat spell in New Jersey, so yeah, it's like in the double digits. So go out and enjoy it.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye. This podcast is brought to you by New Jersey wedding officiant Andrea Pertel, owner of For This Joyous Occasion Officiating Services.
And Celia Milton, owner of NJ Vows Now, also New Jersey wedding officiating services. We're up in North Jersey, and Andrea is down in Central and South Jersey. So together we cover the whole state, don't we?
Yes, yes.